Action!
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Grudge Report. I'm Margaret Reeb of the SETI Institute, and I am joined, as always, by Franck, Marchis, who's a senior astronomer here at the SETI Institute and chief science officer at Unistellar. Do you want me to call you Dr. Marchis?
No, you don't need to call me Dr. Marchis.
He got his PhD, if in case you were wondering. I'm sure none of you were. We're also joined today by Pluto, because we're going to talk about Pluto-ish objects later on. We are going to talk about the Foundation today, episode 2, which is called Preparing to Live. Before we dive into the science of this episode and give you spoiler alerts, I do want to address a couple comments about sponsorship. We aren't sponsored, but if you happen to work at Apple and you're watching this and you'd like to sponsor our show, please let us know. We just do this because it's fun to talk about science in science fiction shows. And at least for me, watching Star Wars as a little girl is what got me really interested in astronomy and later on in astrobiology and led me to my job. So I'm sure that shows like the Foundation will do the same for the next generation of scientists. So thank you for tuning in. Franck, do you have anything to add on that front?
No, I'm also, the reason I became an astronomer is also because I love science fiction.
And the Foundation, like we talked about last episode. So Franck is sitting here today because of the show that we are going to talk about. So this is your official spoiler warning. If you have not caught up, I'll give you a chance to pause and get caught up and then come back and listen to us probably overanalyze this episode of the Foundation. So we have two storylines in this episode. One is the ship that has the first generation of the Foundation aboard, preparing to get to Terminus. It's going to take them a couple of years. There's a lot to talk about there. The second storyline in this episode is about what's going on Trantor, which is the capital of the Galactic Empire. So, Franck, I think we talked about starting on the ship.
Yes.
And what's going on here? There's a lot going on in this ship. It seems very crowded to me personally.
Yeah. So first, we should say that the two storyline doesn't seem to be happening at the same time.
Fair.
Because on the planet, they say it's 2 weeks after the collapse of the Star Bridge. And on the starship, we can see that the characters are getting very close to it from each other, especially two of them. So I don't think it was 2 weeks.
Things have progressed.
Yes.
Probably a couple of months. Plus, they're going much faster than the people on Trantor, right?
So they are on the spaceship on the way to the planet's terminus. And when I say they, I was wondering what was the size of the spaceship and how many people were there. So in fact, we see the spaceship from at the beginning of the show. And you see people, they're doing simulation. There seems to be even a laundry area. I mean, it seems to be quite a kind of
a dry clean service.
Yeah,
yes.
Dry clean service.
Very fancy.
So it looks kind of a cruise basically.
I was thinking it looked like a hotel, especially the swimming pool.
But in the show, Gail made a comment. She said, "We have, of course, I'm not going to get exact number." We know that 30% of this population will die when we arrive at Terminus because of the issue they will find over there, and that's 1,750 something dead people. So that means there is 5,000 people in the spaceship.
That's a big spaceship.
That's a big spaceship. That's the size of a cruise.
Basically. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I live in Seattle, and those cruise ships that pull up are giant. So there are a lot of people going to Terminus.
The main activity they have at the moment is to practice how to survive on the planet by doing some kind of scenario simulation, role-playing, into this interesting machine which simulates an environment.
The mining environment, right?
Yes. They do the mining in this case. And they failed, by the way. And they failed because of a bishop claw.
Oh, which was mentioned in the first episode. And I Googled it because I thought it was something that I just didn't understand. And nothing came up in my Google search. But this episode explained it a little bit. So
this seems to be an endemic species of the Terminus planet. It looks kind of a tiger. We don't see much of it.
It looks scary.
And scary and not very friendly animal that you want to have as a pet. It's also probably the top of the food chain of the ecosystem on Terminus. One thing I noticed, first he has 2 eyes and I think it's 4 legs, like a tiger on Earth.
Like a lot of biology here on Earth.
Very similar to the biology we have on our planet. So probably Terminus have more or less the same gravity, because if the animal have more or less the same structure and the same size, you can assume that you have the same gravity for Terminus. And the eyes, the 2 eyes may give us information about the color and the way the fact that there is enough light on the planet, so they don't have to have gigantic eyes to be able to see in the dark, in the day, for instance. So that's one thing. The second important part is that in the show they mention that this animal exists on the Terminus planet and the outer part. And that's interesting.
The outer part of the planet? Or
the outer part, the outer ring, basically.
Oh, okay.
So the bishop claw, and it's a small detail, I'm sorry, but
no,
it seems to be an animal that has evolved on different planets.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, if that were to have happened in the universe somewhere, that would be an amazing feat of biology, wouldn't you say? Because
we know panspermia make that we can have transfer of bacteria or microbes, but transfer of an entire species, that's kind of weird.
So, something that evolved that probably wouldn't survive in the vacuum of space or on, a meteor or something.
So it's a mystery, but it's an interesting animal, and I'm pretty sure we are going to see a lot of this in the future.
I think so too. It's a good plot device. I will say, I don't know if biology on a planet orbiting a red dwarf star would look like that, but who knows?
But we are not biologists.
No, but we can pretend. This Grudge report is all about overanalyzing. If you agree with me, please comment below. If you agree with Franck, don't comment. Just kidding. Please do comment. We read all your comments and we love them. Anything else on the bishop's claw?
No, that's all for the bishop.
I would also love to know how it got its name. That's a very unique name. Probably has something to do with its weapons of choice. So they were going through this simulation. They've got a bunch of people on the ship. I know I'm being very negative, but it does seem like they should have brought some folks who know how to mine and maybe wouldn't have just died in the simulation. I am quite worried about all of them.
But remember, between the time the emperor say, now you are leaving your exile, and the time they prepare the mission, I don't think they had the time to go through everybody and look at each person to make sure that we have the miner, we have the cook, we have the...
That's true. They were probably under pressure and they didn't want to get executed. So, I mean, they probably had the best folks. They picked the best applications. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Gail, with her appointment with the doctor, because it sounds like being on the ship, the journey itself is hurting people, and particularly the ability to reproduce.
Yes.
And when I thought that, I thought maybe it's radiation. What did you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's the ability to reproduce, because there is already someone who is pregnant in the ship.
But she says that the baby might have birth defects.
So it's the ability to have a fetus evolving into a human being.
Okay.
So the reason is probably the radiation in space. In space, there is radiation. As soon you're not protected by the magnetosphere of your planet, you are basically facing radiation coming from stars surrounding it. We don't know anything about the propulsion system of the spaceship. I just noticed that it's super slow. I mean, it was like so slow that I really wonder if they're going to take 800 days or 800 years to arrive on Terminus.
It might take a little bit longer.
Yeah, but you can assume as well that a propulsion system like this produce radiation if it's really like a faster than light propulsion system. And maybe some effect also on the way a fetus grow. And finally, there is a problem of gravity. Doesn't seem to affect them at all. That's extremely surprising. The spaceship is flat, okay, kind of. We see it from far away. And there is a shoot where they go inside a window and you can see a swimming pool, right? I mean, it's great to have a swimming pool in a spaceship, but I really wonder how they managed to create a gravity in a structure like that.
To hold water.
Yes, to hold water.
Yeah. I don't know.
So it's a mystery, but what she said at the end is that she wants to keep the baby because she thinks that the condition in the spaceship are better than the condition they will have on Terminus, because on Terminus, the planet, they expect to have some extreme weather and probably have to face some
Bishop clause.
And you don't want to have that.
No.
When you have a baby around.
No. It's an interesting conundrum to be in, because they probably need quite a few people to repopulate this, or to populate the planet, because no human beings are there at the moment, but
so that's the reason they store the eggs, apparently, right?
The zygotes?
Yeah, to make sure that in the future they can reproduce and create more human.
Yes. In the books, at least in the first book, which I have almost finished, Terminus becomes a very advanced civilization. So it's interesting how that in the show they're sort of throwing up all these challenges that you would run into if you were going to an unpopulated planet. It's an interesting element that they've added. And also, we have some interesting budget discussions in this episode as well, where it sounds like the members of the Foundation are trying to figure out which planets and cultural knowledge in all of the Galactic Empire to save in their encyclopedia. Did you find that budget conversation interesting, Franck?
Yeah, there is a lot of things to say in this budget conversation. There is like two main points that I would like to mention. One, in the budget, they give us an idea of the size of the empire, because she said we are going to allocate 5.6% for 3% of the planet in the inner part, close to Trantor. Okay, so if you make and she mentioned that corresponds to 40 trillion people and 300 planets, worlds. And they also say 100 languages, but that's a detail. So now that's mean that if you make reverse calculation, the empire has around 700 trillion people or 5,000 planets. That's a lot of worlds. That's a lot of habitable worlds. It looks a big number like that, 5,000, but we know now, science told us that there is at least 300 million potentially habitable planets in our galaxy. Okay, so 5,000 is not such a big number compared to the real number of habitable planets we think we have in our galaxy.
And do you think with the James Webb Space Telescope we'll get an even more refined number potentially?
Not with this one. With TESS and Plateau, we will.
Okay, so we're working on it.
Yes, we're working on this because those are missions that will catalogs more and more planets, so we have more statistics on them, on the existence.
Let's talk about a point that she makes as well about base 10 systems. I thought that was interesting. What did you make of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation on the. Well, basically, they decided what to save and what not to save. So she disagreed because she's from the outer world, and they want to allocate 5.6% of the budget to 3% of the population, which is in her mind not appropriate because the other worlds are also important. And she's discussing with people from Trantor, obviously, or from the inner part. And for them, the numerical system that we should use, that is being used, is a base 10. And it's a fact, and that's the way it is. But she's from an outside, and she's an outsider, so she brought the idea that, in fact, a lot of planets and civilizations in the empire use system 12 or system 27. So 27 based on the fact that they're counting body parts, which is a weird. I was trying to count body parts, but I didn't reach 27. So make a calculation yourself. List all the body parts and let us know if you reached number 27.
Yes. What's the base that you would prefer?
Yes.
But her comment about base 12 was interesting because it's divisible by more numbers than 10. Isn't that what she said?
Yes, that's what she said. That's true.
Which is useful.
Yeah, but. The perception, the good part here is the difference of perception between scientists, basically. Because even if you're a scientist and we suppose neutral, we still kind of affected by the way we grew up, by what we learn when we were a kid, and so on. So for the people of Trantor, the base 10 is the number, the way of counting. And it didn't reach their mind that there is different way of counting, different bases. But she's from the outer world, so she brought it up. And we have this conversation a lot, in fact, in our world at the moment, by having different perception and different culture, bringing more diversity in anything, in fact, because of that, because people are focused, a small part of the population take decision for the entire world, ignoring what's happening in other countries, in other culture.
Yeah. Even things like math and science, which you might think is a little bit more rigid and set in stone than something like literary analysis, but you don't even know what biases you possess yourself, right? Like the Trantor folks didn't even, they took for granted that base 10 is not something that is basic everywhere else. It's not a frame of reference. So I thought that was a really great point that she brought up in a good discussion, very pertinent. Anything else on the ship? There's one thing that happens near the end of the episode that we'll come back to because it was crazy, but I just want to make sure we haven't missed any science on our ship. All right. Are we ready to go to Trantor itself?
Your favorite planet?
I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. And I know I throw a lot of shade on the show talking about Terminus orbiting a red dwarf, but we'll see how that plays out. Let's talk about dwarf planets, because that's one of the first scenes that we have in the Trantor storyline. Ato, who seems to be an advisor to the Emperor, the Empire, arrives at a dwarf planet to find out who made body modifications to the terrorists that blew up the Star Bridge. There's a lot to unpack there, Franck. So what do you want to start with?
I'm going to be the dry scientist. I want us to talk about dwarf planet.
Okay. Well, this is why we brought our friendly model of Pluto.
So they are on a dwarf planet called Ethria, A-E-T-H-A-R-A.
I like that pronunciation.
Yeah. So one thing is, at first there is truly an asteroid on Earth called Ethria. Is the number 132. It's a 40-kilometer body in the main belt. Now look at this.
So it's in the main asteroid belt?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
It's not a dwarf planet because it's a 40-kilometer.
It's just a small.
It's a small rock, basically. Okay, it's one of the biggest ones, but it's not that big compared to a dwarf planet. Typically, a dwarf planet has a size of 400 kilometers. So remember, the dwarf planet is an object which orbits around the sun. Mm-hmm. So it cannot be orbiting something else, not another star. And it has a size which is close to the equilibrium size you can expect. So kind of circular or ellipsoidal. Okay, that's the definition of the dwarf planet that was decided when Pluto was demoted and put into the category of dwarf planet. So in our solar system, we know there is different numbers. There's a huge argument at the moment between different researchers and different field and different way of counting dwarf planet. But the last number I checked, they say that there could be at least 200 dwarf planets in the Kuiper belt and up to 10,000 in the Oort cloud. But this is being still discussed, as I say, between Mark Brown and some other researchers. So I'm not going to go through the detail, but the main part here is that we are on a dwarf planet. They mentioned that we are on a dwarf planet, and I was super happy to see that the term dwarf planet basically is so now known by people that we are using it in science fiction shows.
Well, of course, because everybody grew up with Pluto being a planet, and everybody was very upset when Pluto got demoted. What I thought Pluto got demoted because it doesn't have its own orbit necessarily, doesn't it intersect with Neptune's orbit?
No, it was demoted because there will be too many of Pluto-like planets.
Oh,
that's the reason, because the size and so on. There's so many reasons, but that was one of the
so many.
It's
Franck and I will take this offline because I stand with Pluto.
I don't care because Pluto don't care. Pluto doesn't care how it's being called by human. Pluto remains a very interesting body in the solar system, whether or not we call it dwarf planet or planet. And for me, that's what mattered the most.
Okay, that's very nice, Franck.
I love Pluto as a dwarf planet.
It is a very interesting body in our solar system.
So you do know that last 2 years ago, we published the shape of Aegea, main belt asteroid. And we found out that Aegea has the equilibrium shape. So Aegea should be a dwarf planet. Like Ceres, basically. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So we are finding dwarf planets not every day, but every year there is new dwarf planet that could be added to the list. And fortunately, the International Astronomical Union has still not added more than, I think there is like 4 dwarf planets officially in the catalog at the moment. We expect to have more coming soon.
It's exciting.
So we started with the show, and we're ending up with the debate between Pluto and whether or not Pluto is a dwarf planet.
No, it's a planet, comma, maybe dwarf. All right. So there is also some interesting body modification things going on this dwarf planet in the Foundation, but I think we've talked a lot about that in the Grudge report. Is there anything particularly interesting you want to bring up there?
No.
I think this might be a good time to talk about Ito, because we find out something interesting about her this episode. What did you think of that reveal, Franck?
Well, Ito is Ito Demoiselle.
Mm-hmm.
That's her name. It's an android. She's in fact a robot. We found out this because she got hurt and she's fixing herself, and she explained to the Emperor Don what's happening, and we see herself fixing herself through the shoulder by removing the skin. And she explains that she's one of the last one remaining from the war.
She might be the only one, right? Yeah, which is crazy.
So it's kind of something happened in the past, and that's called the wars on robots, if I remember, the war on robots. And they basically humanity decided to wipe out robots and decided that they will live without those machines. And the interesting part is that you know that Asimov is very known for his book and the law of robotics, right? iRobot, etc. And so if you read books of Asimov, you will see a robot coming often in the storyline. His name is Daniel Olivel. And in fact, Ito is probably this robot, which changed appearance but live like 16,000 years in the future.
Yeah, they're weaving in that recurring theme and in his other work into the show. I thought the actress who portrays Ito, or the actor who portrays Ito, did an amazing job, because until this reveal happened, I was kind of wondering why she was walking a certain way. She seemed awkward, and I thought that was an interesting choice. And then this reveal made it all click together. So hats off to her. I wish I could recall her name, but I thought that was a wonderful reveal. What should we talk about? Oh my gosh, let's talk about the Star Bridge, which it still has debris and some victims floating around in the atmosphere.
Yes,
I can't remember how many. But
I have 127 bodies still in orbit around the planet. And one of the problems is that the Star Bridge is very close to the planet. So those bodies and fragments of the space station are coming back to the atmosphere and burning like meteors. So the Emperor say we need to clean this, because everywhere on the planet, all Trantor population, they just have to look up to see the incompetence of the emperors.
Yes. Yeah. Which is a very visceral visual of their failure. So, and it's also just, if I were related to one of the victims, I would definitely wouldn't want the body of my loved one floating around in the atmosphere and burning up. So, it's interesting that they haven't been able to clean up quickly.
Someone mentioned it's not a priority. Don't forget, it's only 2 weeks after the attack. So the priority of the Emperor is to find who did this. and find a way to divert the psyche and make sure that people think about something else. So that's a transition, in fact, to
the next point. Thank you, Franck. Yes, because thank you to whoever left the really long, well thought out comment on my previous comment in the last episode about political science and different types of government, because this episode gives us a really interesting lens into the 3 different emperors. I was thinking, because I really want to know the dynamics between the robots and the androids and humans, because I thought, why didn't Cleon 1 just try and live forever? Because when you have 3 different rulers, it's hard to know who's in charge. There's a little bit of tension in this episode between Day and Dusk. I think it's pretty clear that Dusk is on his way out. I don't know what's going to happen, but I get a little bit of a vibe that Day might usher him out, assassinate him, because they have this contentious chat a couple of times throughout the episode. So, I mean, if you're a citizen of Trantor and you grew up with the older emperor and you want to follow him, it's just, it's getting a little muddled. I don't know where my allegiances would lie. This is all that I'm going to say. And also, Dawn seems to have a really close relationship with Ito. So, again, it's a very interesting type of government, but it looks like Day is the one that's calling the shots, because he has a very dramatic moment in the episode. Do you want to talk about it? Because it's crazy.
Which one? The one when the execution?
Yes. What other? Yes. He's a very dramatic character, but this was the cherry on top.
Is more than dramatic.
Oh yes, yeah. Whoa, yes.
It's basically you mentioned it. He needs to find who did that. And if you cannot find who did it, so he's gonna accuse the
2 ambassadors.
But he accused basically the planet, Anacreon and Thetis, to be the one who organized this. Even though they can work together, obviously, because they're in war, so there is no reason. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But he basically organized this execution of the entire ambassadors. He doesn't kill the main one. You notice that?
Yes.
And at the same time, he basically it's not a display because it's not a screen, but there is a 3D view of the 2 planets being attacked by the Empire army. And I don't know, we don't exactly know what's happening on this planet, but they launch a lot of missiles toward the planet. So they're basically burning down the surface or destroying the main cities.
Yes. And he must have done a lot of really great calculations to line up the attack, which is happening light years away, with the execution. I thought that was
50,000 light years away. I don't know how they do that.
I don't know.
And having all the spaceship arriving exactly at the same time. I mean,
to 2 different planets.
To 2 different planets, and this happening at the same time that they're doing the execution on Trantor. It's a lot of logistic here. I don't think that's possible.
Yes, it was very dramatic for the show, but it would be pretty difficult in real life to add to you. Maybe they were recordings. Maybe it wasn't live TV. Who knows? But I do suppose that the planets themselves clearly weren't destroyed, and there must be some population left, because he's sending the 2 head ambassadors of either planet back, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I thought this was not a great move, but I also understood that he was trying to make a statement. I think he could have done something completely different, because he's probably made 2 entire planets very angry at the Empire. So, we'll see how this plays out. Anything else on Trantor before we talk about the very end of the episode?
No, I have something to say, but it's going to be toward the end. It's related to the end.
Okay, so let's talk about the end. I was not expecting Rach to murder Harry. I still feel weird saying it. It's just very surprising. And then he puts Gail in a life pod, an escape pod, with the murder weapon. So, what's going on, Franck? What do you think? Because in the book, this doesn't happen, right? Yeah.
So what happened? I watched the show twice to kind of put together a story. Okay, so there is a scene in the show where we see Hari doing calculation over and over, and there is a result that he doesn't like in the calculation.
His own death?
I don't think it's his own death, because he mentioned multiple times in the show that he should have died. But the reason he did not die is because Gail came. So I think somehow in his psychohistory calculation, he does find out that he has to die. That's my interpretation. But he's not completely dying. Because you remember, just before he died, his son takes away something from his ear.
Oh,
I don't know what this artifact is, but maybe there is some kind of way for him to regenerate himself or something like that. So this is a complete extrapolation from my side, but I think he did organize his execution by his own son. So the psychohistory follow the equation. His equation works as is expected, because the fact that he was here was basically affected the evolution of the history. So that's why he decided to remove himself in the story. And that's the reason he has this weird moment where he goes to see the workers, and he have this speech, like he's saying goodbye to them.
Yeah, I thought that was
like
unusually dramatic, right? For him.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And he wants to have this shirt, like his super important shirt that he's wearing when he gets killed as well. Yeah. So in my mind, this is something that is staged. We will see. There is a third episode. We're going to see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
I may be completely wrong here.
I know, that's a good theory. Harry, his portrayal, I love the actor. Thank you for whoever left the comment to point out that this actor is also in The Expanse. He's great. I really, like I said, I enjoy his performance, but Harry kind of creeps me out a little bit, and maybe it's because Gail and Raish are together, and Gail seems to think that Harry wouldn't approve and that he's jealous, which is kind of weird to be jealous of your son being in a relationship. I'm not sure. And then the reveal that he sort of took his son, his adopted son, away from his family and was sort of positioning Rach as this like thief with an alcoholic father, when that perhaps wasn't the truth. So regardless, he's more complicated in the show than he is in the book, definitely. And I was not expecting him to die this early on.
So one more thing that I noticed is, and I think it's related to what happened with Trantor. It's not science. Once again, it's extrapolation in my mind. You remember, Dusk is going to see a priest.
Right.
The priest that Gail went to see.
Yes.
Because he's trying to find out whether or not Gail is a seer, meaning that she can see the future. And multiple times in the first episode and the second episode, you have the feeling that Gail can see the future. Before the explosion of the starbase, she knew it would happen. And in the end of this episode, she knows that something is going to happen to...
That's right. She got out of the swimming pool.
In panic mode. So there is something more here that we are putting together. We are going to understand in the show. She has something that's related to her religion.
Yes. And she also woke up when she was traveling through the black hole, right? Which seemed to, the person or the android or whoever that was attending to the passengers seemed to think that was odd. Yeah. So I agree. There's something going on with her. And I'm interested to see where it goes. Anything else on this episode 2 of the Foundation?
No, it's a lot. There was a lot of science in this one. There's a lot of interaction between characters. So I don't have much to say, but it was an interesting episode because, it put kind of, we know now better the story and the characters. And true, there is this mysterious murder at the end, but we will see.
We will see. Thank you so much for joining us. I think episode 3 of the Foundation drops on Friday, so maybe we'll record something else later this week to overanalyze that episode. as I said, thank you so much for tuning in. We are a product of the SETI Institute, where we're sitting right now. If you're interested in learning more about the SETI Institute or getting involved, check out the links below. We are a nonprofit, and our mission is to understand the nature, origin, and prevalence of life in the universe. So if you like the foundation, I have no doubt that you will like the work at the SETI Institute. And like I mentioned, we are a nonprofit. So if you have a couple dollars to spare, you like our mission, or you like the Grudge report, please donate. We will be forever grateful. And until next time, stay safe. Pluto's a planet.